My name is Margaret Fletcher, a 58-year-old woman living in a small, quiet suburban house in Boston. My life passes quietly with my small backyard garden, my part-time job at the city library, and warm evenings with a cup of tea. My husband passed away over a decade ago, leaving me with a lingering but peaceful emptiness. My daughter, Sophia, is my only remaining family. But the relationship between my daughter and me is not entirely smooth. Sophia is a talented, ambitious, but also very selfish woman. She is married to Nathan Blake, a kind man, though sometimes hot-tempered, and they seem to have a happy marriage, at least I thought so. Then one evening, when I had just finished work at the library and returned home, Nathan suddenly appeared at my door. Not with his usual polite demeanor, but with a disheveled appearance, red eyes, and trembling hands. Before I could ask what was happening, he blurted out words full of anger. "Do you know what your daughter has done? Margaret, she has ruined my life." I was stunned by his emotional outburst, but before I could react, Nathan pushed the door open, as if he wanted to pour all his pain into my small space. He threw his phone onto the table, the screen still open with amorous text messages between Sophia and another man. Each word was like a sharp knife, revealing the harsh truth. She cheated on me. They were doing all sorts of things, right in my house, on my bed. Nathan yelled, his voice breaking in anger. I didn't know what to say except stand still, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. His words were like a violent wave crashing down, sweeping away the fragile peace I had built. Nathan continued to tell his story, his voice mixed with pain and hatred. He said he had suspected Sophia for a few weeks after noticing she was frequently coming home late, always kept her phone close, and started to be cold towards him. One evening, while Sophia was showering, Nathan unlocked her phone and discovered a series of messages and intimate photos between her and a man named Mark, her colleague at the law firm. The ambiguous texts, the promises to run away together made Nathan unable to believe his eyes. He decided to confront Sophia that very night. When she came out of the bathroom, he held up the phone in front of her face and asked directly, "What is this? Do you have anything to explain?" But instead of showing remorse, Sophia was indifferent, even blaming Nathan for invading her privacy. "Yes, I'm having an affair. But what about you? Have you ever made me happy?" Those words struck Nathan like a fatal blow. Nathan said that he left the house in a rage, driving around the city before realizing he had nowhere else to go. And so he came here, to my house, with the intention of venting all the frustration in his heart. But instead of finding comfort, Nathan continued to vent his anger on me. He blamed me for not knowing how to raise my daughter, for letting Sophia become a treacherous woman. His harsh words deeply hurt me, but I tried to remain calm, because I understood that it wasn't entirely his fault. I invited Nathan to sit down and made him a cup of tea, hoping to soothe his anger. "Nathan, I'm sorry for what my daughter has done," I said, my voice soft but firm. "But please, calm down. I can't help if you continue like this." Nathan was silent for a long moment, his eyes red and filled with helplessness. "I loved Sophia with all my heart," he said, his voice softer but still full of pain. "I did everything for her, but in the end, I'm just the one who was abandoned." I didn't know how to respond. The truth is, I didn't fully understand Sophia either, my only daughter. She had always been distant, reserved, and had never really shared anything with me since she grew up. But no matter what, I couldn't deny that what Sophia did to Nathan was wrong. "Nathan, I know you're in a lot of pain," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "But you need time to think. If you want, you can stay here for a while. I can't change what happened, but I can listen to you." My offer seemed to surprise Nathan. He looked at me, his eyes showing a hint of surprise, but then he nodded, as if it was the only option left. I didn't know what would happen next, but I understood that, from this moment on, my peaceful life would never be the same. Nathan agreed to stay at my house for a while, but from the moment he crossed the threshold, the atmosphere became heavy. The first few days were full of tension and exhaustion. Nathan, with his confused state of mind and uncontrollable anger, left a clear mark throughout my once peaceful home. He often dropped and broke small items in the house, such as ceramic cups or vases. Once, while holding a hot cup of coffee, he accidentally spilled it on my beloved tablecloth. Instead of apologizing, Nathan just shrugged and turned away, leaving me to deal with it. These actions were not out of malice, but seemed to be the expression of someone being swept away by emotions, no longer able to control themselves. I realized that Nathan's anger was not only directed at Sophia, but also at himself. Sometimes, he sat quietly in the living room, his eyes gazing into the distance, full of hurt and helplessness. But when I tried to approach him, he immediately erected a defensive wall, with harsh words and cold gestures. "Margaret, you don't understand. Don't try to act like you understand me," he said, his voice full of challenge. I didn't respond, just quietly cleaned up the broken pieces on the floor or made another cup of tea to put on the table. Every action of mine was patient, as a way to show Nathan that not everyone would respond to him with anger. One morning, when Nathan broke a large vase, I still kept my voice gentle. "Nathan, I know you're very angry. But breaking things won't make you feel any better. If you need it, I'm always ready to listen." He looked at me, his eyes red as if wanting to say something, but then just turned and walked away. In the following days, I noticed a slight change in him. He started sitting at the dining table with me, although he didn't say anything. Occasionally, when I made coffee, he would give a slight nod instead of a thank you. These were small but encouraging signs. My neighbors also couldn't ignore the situation. A few people hinted when they met me at the nearby supermarket. "Margaret, what's wrong with your son-in-law? I heard some smashing last night." "Oh dear, living with someone like that must be very difficult." I just smiled, avoiding letting those comments affect me. I knew Nathan needed time to get through this crisis, and I decided not to abandon him. One evening, as I was reading a book in the living room, Nathan unexpectedly sat down in the opposite chair. His face was tired, his eyes filled with sadness. He didn't say anything, just sat there quietly for a long time. I put my book down and looked at him, waiting. "Margaret," he began, his voice deep and lost. "I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like everything is falling apart." I nodded gently, keeping my gaze soft towards him. "Nathan, I can't change what Sophia has done, but I can listen to you. If you want, please tell me." He hesitated for a moment, then began to speak. Each word he spoke seemed to release a part of the burden in his heart. He talked about the feeling of helplessness when he always tried his best but was never valued by Sophia. He talked about the times she criticized him, the harsh words she threw at him when he only wanted to do the best for his family. "I thought I wasn't good enough," Nathan sighed, his eyes drooping. "I loved her very much. But it seems my love was never enough." I listened quietly, without interrupting. What he said made me realize that, beneath that tough and hot-tempered exterior, Nathan was a man in pain, trying to find his self-worth again. "Nathan, sometimes we can't control what others do, but we can control how we react," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You are not alone. No matter what happens, I'm here, to help you get through this." My words seemed to move Nathan. He looked at me, his eyes filled with tears, and nodded slightly. It was the moment I knew that, although the road ahead was long and full of thorns, Nathan had begun to open up. Life may have thrown us into this situation, but I believed that, with patience and understanding, things would gradually become easier. In the days following the incident in the kitchen, Nathan continued to carry his anger, although he had begun to reduce his aggression. But with just a small disagreement or something he didn't like, he would lose control again. This time it was a loud thud from the living room when Nathan threw the remote control hard onto the table, causing Margaret to run out from the kitchen to see what was happening. "Nathan, what's wrong?" Margaret asked, her voice both worried and reproachful. "This TV is broken again. Can't watch anything," Nathan yelled, his eyes full of annoyance. Margaret looked at the remote, then turned to Nathan. It's just the batteries are low. Let me change them. There's no need to overreact like that. Nathan slumped down on the chair, his hands running through his hair in tension. Margaret noticed his hands trembling, a clear sign of his psychological instability. She didn't say anything more, just quietly replaced the batteries in the remote and handed it back to Nathan. There you go, try it again. Nathan took it, tried turning on the TV, and indeed it worked normally. But instead of thanking her, he just remained silent, his eyes looking blankly at the screen. Margaret sighed, poured him a glass of water, and sat down next to him. Nathan, I know you're very tired inside. But these actions don't help you at all. Nathan didn't answer, but his eyes showed a hint of wavering. Margaret noticed it and continued. I've also been through difficult times, Nathan. After my husband passed away, I didn't know what to do. But I learned one thing: anger is not the way to heal. Nathan turned to look at her, his eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to do anymore, Margaret. Everything is falling apart. I tried my best, but Sophia. She never valued me. Margaret placed her hand on Nathan's shoulder, her eyes filled with understanding. You don't have to be strong right now. But you need to learn to feel and accept this pain. That's the first step to overcome it. Outside the house, the neighbors' gossip grew louder. They didn't intervene, but always whispered whenever Margaret stepped out into the yard or walked through the neighborhood. That son-in-law is really awful, smashing things like that must be very scary for Margaret. I heard he was betrayed by his wife, but whatever he does, he can't keep making noise like this. Margaret heard everything, but she always maintained a calm demeanor. Whenever she met someone, she gently apologized for the inconvenience they had to endure. I'm very sorry if the noise disturbed everyone. But everything is all right. There's nothing to worry about. However, inside, she knew that things were not all right, as she said. Nathan was sinking into chaos, and she herself felt increasing pressure. But Margaret didn't want to give up. She persevered day by day, trying to bring Nathan out of the darkness of anger and pain. One afternoon, when Nathan was sitting on the front steps of the house, Margaret brought out 2 cups of hot tea and sat down beside him. A cool breeze blew through, carrying the scent of the flowers she planted in the front yard. Nathan, do you remember the first time you met Sophia? She asked, her voice gentle. Nathan looked up, a hint of surprise on his face. I remember. It was at a party of my friend. She walked in, looking as radiant as a star. I think I fell in love with her at first sight. Margaret smiled, but her eyes remained thoughtful. Sophia can be someone who captivates others. But sometimes, that fascination makes us lose the ability to see more important things. Nathan was silent, but his eyes gradually became deeper. Maybe you're right. I spent too much time trying to please her, and forgot about myself. Margaret nodded. Nathan, life is not always fair. But what matters is how we face those injustices. You were a good husband, a responsible man. That doesn't change just because Sophia didn't recognize your value. Nathan bowed his head, tears silently falling on his cheeks. I don't know if I can forgive her, or even forgive myself for letting this happen. Margaret placed her hand on his shoulder, her eyes filled with sympathy. No one is asking you to forgive immediately. But give yourself time, Nathan. Time to grieve, to think, and finally to heal. That afternoon, for the first time, Nathan didn't feel pressured or angry. He sat there, listening to the wind, feeling Margaret's warm presence beside him. And in that brief moment, he realized that he was not alone. There was someone, though not related by blood, who was always there, ready to listen and share all his suffering. Margaret and Nathan's story had not yet reached its conclusion, but it seemed they had found a new starting point, where both could find peace in their hearts. The neighbors, although still gossiping, gradually realized that Margaret's small house was not a place of chaos, but a place of healing. After a long period of tension and pain, the relationship between me and Nathan finally found a new stability. The dinners together became more comfortable, the conversations lasting for hours were no longer interrupted by anger or resentment. I felt in Nathan not only a man who had been broken, but a person with rich emotions, deep, and especially yearning to be loved. I also realized that I, after so many years of living in loneliness, had finally found a source of comfort and motivation to continue living a more meaningful life. However, this peace did not last long. Sophia, my daughter, whom I always hoped would soon realize her mistake, suddenly returned. For the first time in months, Sophia appeared on my doorstep with an arrogant look and eyes full of jealousy. Before I could ask anything, she uttered cold words. "Mom, it's funny how you can be so close to Nathan, my ex-husband. Aren't you ashamed?" I calmly replied, trying not to reveal the disappointment in my voice. "Sophia, I don't think you have the right to say that after what you've done. I'm just trying to help Nathan during his difficult time." But Sophia was not easily persuaded. She began to appear more often, sometimes without warning, bringing a tense atmosphere every time she visited. At first, I thought she was just angry that Nathan had gradually found new happiness, but gradually, I realized Sophia not only wanted to reclaim Nathan, she wanted to destroy anything good that I and Nathan were building. One day, Sophia brought her own daughter, Chloe, to my house. Chloe, in her early 20s, had a charming appearance and confident demeanor. From the moment she stepped into the house, Chloe did not hesitate to use her eyes and gestures to attract Nathan's attention. I saw everything, but I chose to remain silent. I wanted to believe that Nathan was mature enough not to fall into this trap, and I also did not want to create a war in my own home. But the situation worsened. Chloe began to find excuses to stay at my house longer, giving the reason that she wanted to help her grandmother. One evening, I caught her deliberately standing close to Nathan in the kitchen, pretending to ask about work, but touching him intentionally. Nathan seemed oblivious, but I knew he also felt uncomfortable. Sophia didn't stop there. She began to spread rumors with the neighbors, saying that I and Nathan had an improper relationship. One day, Mrs. Dorothy, the next-door neighbor, stopped by my house and said with hesitation, "Margaret, I don't want to interfere in your family affairs, but people are talking about you and Nathan." I smiled in response, although my heart was boiling. "Thank you, Dorothy. But I assure you that there is nothing to worry about. We are just trying to find peace after the storms." These gossips made me feel both sad and angry. But what disappointed me most was Sophia's actions. As my daughter, she should have understood that I had always tried to protect the family, not destroy it. Yet now, she was deliberately going against me, even using her own daughter as a tool to achieve her goals. One evening, when I was cleaning in the kitchen, Sophia walked in with a challenging look. "Do you think you can replace me in Nathan's life? Don't even dream about it. He belongs to me, and you have no right to interfere." I put the cleaning cloth down on the table, turned to look directly into her eyes. "Sophia, I'm not taking anyone away. If you had cherished Nathan, you wouldn't have lost him. And I don't need to explain further. I just want you to understand that what you're doing is only making things worse." Sophia laughed coldly. "Worse? No, Mom, I'm just taking back what should have been mine." She left, leaving me standing there with a heavy heart. I couldn't understand why Sophia had become so vicious. Perhaps it was jealousy, the dissatisfaction of seeing me and Nathan gradually finding harmony that she never had. But I was determined not to let Sophia win. I knew that if I let her continue, not only I but Nathan would also be deeply hurt. I had to protect what I had, protect the happiness that Nathan and I had tried to build. I began to be more frank with Nathan about everything. One evening, after Sophia and Chloe had just left, I sat down next to him and said, "Nathan, I think we need to talk. I know Sophia is trying to break everything between us, and I don't want her to succeed. I need to know that you are also willing to face this with me." Nathan looked at me, his eyes full of determination. "Margaret, I know what Sophia is doing. and I won't let her destroy anything else. I'm here because I trust you, and I won't let anyone, even Sophia, hurt us." Nathan's words were like a warm flame in my heart. Although everything was still very difficult, I knew I was not alone in this fight. I decided that, no matter how many storms I had to face, I would not let anyone, even my own daughter, take away the happiness that I had struggled so hard to achieve. I don't remember the last time I felt such disappointment and heartache. In recent days, Sophia has not only bothered me with reproaches and gossip, but also openly tried to win Nathan back. She appears without warning, suddenly bursting into the house, creating an emotional storm. Each time, I have to keep myself very calm, but this time, I knew, it was time I could no longer remain silent. That day, as I was preparing dinner for Nathan and myself, Sophia came again. She didn't knock, just pushed the door open and walked in as if it were her own home. I was startled when I saw her, her hair disheveled, her eyes sharp, and her lips curled into a venomous smile. "You're really something, aren't you? From a mother-in-law, you've turned into a woman who steals her own daughter's husband," she yelled, her voice full of resentment. I put the knife down on the table, turned to look at Sophia with a determined gaze. "Sophia, what are you talking about? This is not how we resolve things." Nathan came down from upstairs, just in time to hear Sophia's harsh words. He was about to speak up to defend me, but I held up my hand to stop him. This was between my daughter and me, and I needed to face it. Sophia moved towards Nathan, her eyes shifting from anger to seduction. "Nathan, I'm sorry. I was wrong. But we can start over, right? You won't choose her over me, will you?" Sophia's words made me feel disgusted. How could a mother face such shamelessness from her own daughter? But what hurt me even more was that Nathan stood still, not answering. Not because he was wavering, but because he was too surprised and didn't know how to react. "Sophia, enough," I said loudly for the first time in years. Both Sophia and Nathan turned to look at me, but Sophia's eyes were still full of defiance. "Enough? You think you have the right to say enough to me?" Sophia laughed coldly, her voice full of sarcasm. "You pushed me into this miserable life. You never truly loved me. And now, you want to steal the only person I've ever loved." I felt my chest tighten. Sophia's words were like knives stabbing straight into my heart. But I knew this was not the time to be weak. I had to be strong to protect Nathan, to protect myself, and everything we had built over the past time. "Sophia, I have always loved you. But that love doesn't mean I will condone your selfishness and malice. Nathan is not an object that you can own or fight over. And I am not someone you can blame for all your mistakes." Sophia walked closer to me, her eyes bloodshot, as if about to go crazy. "You think you're better than me? You think you're a good person? You're nothing, just a lonely old woman clinging to other people's pity." Those words were the last straw. I felt the disappointment in my heart transform into a tsunami, sweeping away all the old pain. "Sophia, I don't want to say this, but I think you need to hear it. Your life is going downhill not because of me, but because of yourself. You need to take responsibility for what you do instead of blaming others." Sophia stood still for a moment, but then she laughed loudly, a cold and bitter laugh. "You think you can win against me? Fine, you keep Nathan, but don't think I'll let it go. I will destroy everything you have." She left the house in a rage, leaving behind a heavy atmosphere. I looked at Nathan, who was still standing like a statue. His eyes were full of worry, but also mixed with admiration. "You didn't have to do this for me," he said, his voice deep. I shook my head. "Nathan, I'm not doing this just for you. I'm doing this for myself, because we deserve happiness, no matter who tries to destroy it." In the following days, Sophia continued to cause trouble. She sent threatening messages, appeared at my house at unexpected hours, and even tried to badmouth me to the neighbors. But I did not give in. Each time, I became even more determined. I knew this was not just a fight with Sophia, but also a fight with my own inner fears and hurts. Nathan and I began discussing the future. He was worried that Sophia would never stop, that she might do something to harm me. But I reassured him that, as long as we were united, no one could break us. Sophia is my daughter, but she has chosen her own path, I said. And we have the right to choose happiness. The last few days Nathan stayed at my house seemed to pass in a strangely peaceful atmosphere. After all the storms, the arguments and hurt, it seemed that both Nathan and I found relief in letting go. Sophia had stopped appearing, or perhaps she had also realized that her destructive efforts could not change anything. Even so, there were still lingering wounds in my heart that were difficult to heal, especially when I thought about what my daughter had done. One afternoon, Nathan sat in the front yard, where the sunlight shone through the old trees, creating shimmering streaks of light on the ground. I brought out 2 cups of tea and sat down beside him. He looked at me, his eyes no longer showing the pain as before, but instead a strange determination. "Margaret," he began, his voice calm but firm, "I think it's time for me to leave here. I want to start over, in a place where I'm not bound by old memories." I was silent for a moment, letting his words sink into my mind. Although I knew this day would come, when I heard him say it, I still felt a sense of loss. Nathan had become a part of my life, not just a person taking shelter but also a companion in difficult times. "Have you decided where you'll go?" I asked, trying to keep my voice gentle. "New York," he replied, his eyes sparkling when he mentioned the name. "I have an old friend there. He said I could try my hand at a new design project. This could be a chance for me to start over." I smiled, although my heart felt empty. "New York will be a great place for you, Nathan. You can find everything you need there: work, friends, and new dreams." Nathan turned to look at me, his eyes full of gratitude. "Margaret, I don't know how to thank you. You not only gave me a place to stay, but also helped me understand that I have value, that I deserve happiness." I put my hand on his, squeezing it gently, feeling the warmth from his palm. "Nathan, you don't need to thank me. I'm just someone who reminded you that hope always exists, even when you think everything has collapsed." That evening, as I was cleaning the living room, the phone rang. It was Sophia. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Mom," her voice rang out, sounding tired and hoarse. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I didn't answer immediately. This was what I had been waiting for, but when it came, I didn't know how I should feel. Hurt, disappointment, and a bit of hope mixed within me. "Sophia, I will always love you," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "But love doesn't mean I will forgive all your mistakes. I hope, from what has happened, you will learn to grow up and treat the people around you better." Sophia was silent, then said, "I understand, Mom. I'm sorry for hurting you and Nathan. I don't know how to face myself." I sighed, feeling a bit of relief when I heard her say these words. "Sophia, I hope you find peace in your heart. Not for me or anyone else, but for yourself." The day Nathan left, the Boston sky was unusually clear. He stood on the front steps of the house, his suitcase beside him, ready for a new journey. I saw him off to the car, my heart filled with mixed emotions. Before getting in the car, he turned back to look at me, his eyes shining with deep gratitude. "Margaret, you are the one who changed my life. Not because of what you did, but because you showed me that sometimes, the best things come from unexpected places." I smiled and nodded. "Nathan, I believe you will do it. Remember, wherever you are, you always have a friend here." The car rolled away from the small street, leaving me standing there, alone. But this time, the loneliness was not as scary as before. I felt at peace, knowing that both Nathan and I had found a new beginning, albeit on different paths. I went back into the house, closing the door behind me, leaving outside all the noise and storms of the past. The house was still quiet as before, but this time, that quiet no longer evoked loneliness. Instead, it brought a feeling of serenity and completeness. Life is a series of interwoven stories, beginnings and endings. I knew that, from this moment on, I was ready to begin a new chapter of my life. A chapter with peace, strength, and deep lessons from the past.